Hello, everybody. This is Patriots History. I'm Larry Schweikart in our inaugural kickoff event. So glad you could join us. Hey, this is new for me. I've never done something on YouTube before, right? And so I've got to be careful, got to mind my P's and Q's. Don't want to end up like Scott Adams or any other people there. So I'll be taking it easy here. What we're going to do here is read through our incredible book, A Patriot's History of the United States. Okay, and I'm going to make extensive commentary and discussions, bringing in new sources and current events, all sorts of stuff as we go through this. It's not going to be a straight read. It's going to be a discussion about American history. Throughout, I will probably make some references to the Patriots History Reader. And this is our documents book. Doesn't contain all the documents that you might want to see, but it contains most of them, something like 85 documents in the book. So you want to take advantage of that and take a look at that. So, nervous? No, I'm not nervous. Actually, I've been blessed. I don't get nervous in front of people. I don't get nervous on TV. The only time I played in front of 10,000 people with my band Rampage a couple of times, once at the Tampa Convention Center, once at West Palm Beach. Wasn't nervous. But the one time I was nervous was when I had a paper that I had to present my dissertation to the American Economic Association. It was chosen as one of the 3 best dissertations in America at that time. Interestingly, I was with a woman and another guy, and all 3 of the dissertations were extremely conservative in their scholarship and viewpoint. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, the reason I was nervous at that time was, for the first time, I wasn't sure I was in control of the subject matter, because I'm speaking to 300 economists, including Nobel Prize winners, and I'm not an economist, I'm a historian. Economic historian, there's a big difference. Once you get me into the ISLM curves and that kind of stuff, I'm done. So I got up there and I started speaking real fast like this, but finally I calmed down, right? And but that's the only time in my life I've ever been nervous. But suffice it to say, I do hope this comes off okay, because like I said, I haven't done this before. All right, so our format is going to be basically, I'm going to discuss Patriots history, starting at the very beginning from Columbus to Trump, for about 50 minutes, because this is new and I'm not yet familiar with all the bells and whistles. There will not be chat, but here's what you can do. If you have a question, send it to me in an email, larry@wildworldofhistory.com, larry@wildworldofhistory.com, and I promise you that I will look at it and answer those questions in the next episode on Wednesday. That's housekeeping detail number 1. Number 2, we will have a professional-looking studio here pretty soon. I'm not sure when it's all ready to go, but we'll get there. Like I say, new stuff. And let's see, what else? Oh, lastly, I am on the road. I am starting the Homeschool convention circuits, and it starts this week in St. Louis. Now, if you're in St. Louis, feel free to come out to the Great Homeschool Convention. Let me know at larry@wildworldofhistory.com. I will get you a free registration to get into the event, and you can see my talks, one on Friday and one on Saturday, on American exceptionalism. So just get a hold of me and I'll make sure and get you in. It's at the St. Charles Convention Center right outside of St. Louis. So stop on by, and that's Thursday through Saturday. Be happy to see you. Love to talk to you. So introduce yourself. Say, hey, I'm a fan on Wild World of History's live stream. And that'll be that. Okay, let me see. What else do we have? Oh, yes. Right after this show, in just a few minutes short of an hour, I will be over on Locals. And you go to Locals, Larry Schweikart live stream, Larry Schweikart Live. And if you're a subscription, if you're a VIP subscriber, or if you subscribed at Locals, or if you bought the Insider at Wild World of Politics, any of those 3, you can see the full stream on Locals. It will start up in just about an hour. And there I will be, shall we say, a little less censored. because I can talk about whatever I want to talk about on locals. And we're going to begin with politics and with a lot of the January 6th stuff. So you'll want to join me for that. If you're not already a subscriber, hey, it's $6 a month. You know, go join up either at Wild World of History, VIP, Wild World of Politics, Insider, or over on Locals itself at the Larry Schweikart Live Locals page. Now, I'm not saying all is going to work. This is my first time doing all this, but I think we can pull it all off, right? Okay. Lastly, I will be doing an ad of sorts. Somebody's got to pay the rent, right? At about 30 minutes into the show. I'm not like Rush. I can't take an ad break every 15, 20 minutes. And by the way, nobody's trying to replace the great Rush Limbaugh, but boy, it would sure be an honor to have a few of those people come in and join us. But I'll be taking a little ad break at half hour in. So if you're a homeschooler and you're watching this, you want to get it working with your lessons and your families, which I encourage everybody to do, there'll be a time there for potty break and other stuff down at the bottom of the hour. All right. We are going to be using the 15th anniversary edition of A Patriot's History of the United States. And some of you have heard this before, but there's a lot of new people who've never heard this story. And I need to set everything up with how Mike Allen and I came to write A Patriot's History of the United States. It's now in its 34th printing, 500,000 copies in print. Needless to say, we've sold a lot of books, quite a few more than Ron DeSantis, for example. Not quite as many as Hillary Clinton, but we're getting there. It's interesting that in his, Howard Zinn, the famous leftist historian, mentioned once that in his first decade since A People's History of the United States came out, he had sold 320,000 copies, and it went through 27 printings. Well, in our first 10 years, we went through more printings than that, I think around 29, and sold almost 350,000 copies. Now, he has a big lead on us because all the colleges, of course, have snapped him up and have him in all the courses, have people's history in all the courses. But we're going to make it up. We're going to catch him at some point. So there's that story. So how did we come to write Patriot's History of the United States? Round about 1991, Mike Allen and I met at a Western History Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was great. It was him and me and a political scientist named Richard Bensell. And you'll notice when we get to the Civil War, I refer to Richard Bensell's work a great deal. He had some great work. So at any rate, Mike and I were lamenting the state of American history and American history textbooks, that there just was nothing we could teach from. Now, the most commonly used book of the day, and many of you, if you're older, you're going to remember this one. It was called The American Pageant by Bailey and Kennedy. Remember, that's a big old book, lots of pictures, but it was a good book for a while. For about 10 years, it was a pretty good book. But then, as often happens, as they got older, and one might say lazier, they brought on a third author named Chu. I can't remember the guy's name. Anyway, they brought in a third younger author. And slowly and predictably, the tone began to change to more leftist history. So that by the time Mike Allen and I met in 1991, American Pageant had become not a leftist book, but very definitely trending that way, and most importantly to us, their treatment of Ronald Reagan was horrendous. And I always tell people, if you want to know how far left a book is, go to the index and find the index entries for Ronald Reagan and see what they say about Reagan. And that's going to tell you right away how far left a book is. And it was funny, I think Jon Stewart or somebody caught a clip of me saying that on Fox and Friends back around 2008. And they did a blow-up picture of Reagan pregnant, because I call this the pregnancy test of a textbook, right? And I thought that was pretty funny, but it is. It's the pregnancy test of a textbook. how far left is it? Check out the Reagan section. So there was another book that some of you may also remember called The National Experience by Morton Blum. And at any rate, all of these books were traditional 1960s era Democrat leftist books. That is to say, they were still hawks about things like Vietnam in many cases, but they were very much in favor of big government, the New Deal. They never found a big government that they didn't like. Let me refer you, for example, to their passages on the transcontinental railroads, which falsely claimed that the transcontinentals couldn't have been built without government assistance. And as we're going to see, that's just simply not the case at all. But there are a lot of other instances, and I'll refer you to yet one other of my books called 48 Liberal Lies About American History if you want to see specifically which textbooks refer to what. So, Mike and I are talking about these textbooks. We did not even think about nor talk about Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. So, this may burst some of your bubbles, but when we wrote A Patriot's History of the United States, we did not have answering Howard Zinn in mind. Rather, we had in mind writing a book that we could use when teaching our own U.S. history classes at the college level or for advanced AP high school students. And so we started writing. Now, I had completed a book called The Entrepreneurial Adventure. It's out of print now, but it was a history of American business. And that book convinced me I can take a big subject like American history and write about it. Till that time, I had only written about sectional U.S. history, as in Southern banking or some Civil War history or things like that. But after I did Entrepreneurial Adventure, I thought, okay, maybe I can do this. But I knew I had some real weaknesses, and I knew there were holes, especially in the colonial era and the American West, that I wasn't as proficient as I should be, and I was going to need help. And long story short, I contacted Mike. I said, would you be interested in co-authoring a history textbook that we both could use for our class? He said, yeah. And this was around 1999. And so we began work, not steady. We didn't work day in and day out. So people will always say, well, how long did it take you to write a book of this size? And it was bigger, but I'll get to that in a minute. But it's not really a fair question because we were both teaching a lot and we were both writing other things. But the book was ready for submission to an editor by about 2003. And Mike and I didn't think we would ever get a publisher. We thought, because it was conservative, certainly no textbook publisher was ever going to buy it. And we kind of made up our minds we were going to do an end run around the textbook publishers. We would make it a trade book if we could. We would self-publish it if we needed to. And so we kind of went into this with the idea that we were going to write this book and spiral bind it and sell it out of the back of a van, you know, like other banned items like plastic straws in California and under Mayor Mike Bloomberg, you know, big gulps in New York, you know, and psst, buddy, plastic straws, Patriots History of the United States, right? And but I had an agent. My agent had helped me write and edit some very big encyclopedias, such as the Encyclopedia of American Business, History, and Biography for Banking, 2 volumes. And I'd done some other work for Ed Knappman, and he said, well, let's see if we can get a publisher for this. And so we handed him the manuscript sometime around 2003. Folks, it was 2,000 printed pages. This is 948 published pages. So, needless to say, our book was way too big for any publisher to consider. But Ed thought it had real value. He was very excited about it, and so he said, I'll tell you what, normal agent fee is 15%. I'll take 20%, but I'll edit the whole thing and get it down to a manageable level. So he did. And he cut roughly, not quite, but almost 1,000 pages out of Patriots History of the United States, if you can believe that. Where did all those pages go? I'm glad you asked. If you go to the wildworldofhistory.com, there are a number of small free vignettes. You can get this stuff, just take your time reading it. And a lot of those came from the side material that we had to cut out for Patriots history. So you want to take a look at some of that stuff. Also, if you start with the first edition that came out in 2004, you're going to see that we naturally had to cut out material as we went up to the present to make room for newer material. So, if you want a more comprehensive Patriots history, get the 2004 and the 2006 version, compare those. So we handed in to two publishers. Now, I don't remember who the other publisher was. They did offer us a small advance, but one of them was Sentinel, which was a brand new publishing house out of New York that was attached to Penguin Books. It was their conservative imprint. And I want to show you something. I don't know if you've noticed this, but their logo, let's see, where is their logo? Oh my gosh, they took the logo off this one. Hang on, let me show you the logo. You're going to want to see this. Okay, here's the first edition. There. See that logo? That is a sentinel, and he's holding a lantern in one hand. What's he holding in the other hand? A bell. Are you kidding me? A bell? What happened? Their original logo was a musket. And even then, in 2003, they were so woke, or starting to get such pressure, they didn't think they could have their symbol be somebody with a lantern and a musket. And look at what they've done now. They've completely taken the whole Sentinel logo of the guy with his lantern out because it's a man. Can't have a man representing the book. That would be bad. So, that was the first thing. Ed cut the book to around 1,200 printed pages. And we got an offer from Sentinel, this arm, a new imprint of Penguin. And my editor was a Irish woman, red hair, named Bernadette Malone, fantastic editor. And she said, this book rang my bell the minute I saw it. And she said, when I was editing it, she lived in an apartment in New York, and she looked across the street, and there was a totally woke Marxist bookstore down there. She said she just loved the thought of them having to put this book in the front window. Right? So she worked on it, and then she says, I've worked on it, and I've worked on it, and I still can't get it down to the target goal. It has to come in at under 1,000 published pages for us to sell it at a price that we think we can sell it at. And she says, I can't get it past 1,200, and I've cut as much as I can. I cut as much as I could. Mike cut. Ed cut. We couldn't get the book down to under 1,200 pages. So she said, can we send this to an outside editor? I said, fine. So they sent it to a fellow named David Freddoso, who's a writer in a number of places. And he did an amazing job. I don't know how he did it, because when I looked at these passages before, I go, oh, we can't take that out. That would really affect things. He would take out entire paragraphs, and it would work. It would still flow the right way. He just did a fantastic job, and the book came in first edition published form at 978 pages with notes and index. That's not a small book, but that was as small as we could get it. So that was how the book came about, is we actually got a publisher, Sentinel. And it came out in 2004, was touted by Claremont Review of Books, National Review, Wall Street Journal, a whole host of groups. We made Amazon up to like number 37, which wasn't, I didn't think, very good, but it was okay. But little inside politics here. There was a competitor book called The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History by Thomas Woods, whom I met several times. And this book was a short, snappy, very much smaller, about 1/4 the size of Patriots History. It was designed for kids, right? I'm not saying it wasn't scholarly or correct. I'm just saying it was not meant to be comprehensive like ours is. And word is that they heard we were doing this book and they rushed theirs out, and they got on Fox and Friends and they took up a lot of the oxygen that our book should get. Nevertheless, and I'll stop with this and we'll get into the book here. But nevertheless, sometime month or two after the book came out, my first interview on the book was on Laura Ingram's show, her radio show, and she did a fantastic job. I mean, she asked the right questions and listened to the answers, and it was just, it was a very good experience. Of course, did many, many others after that. But then I get this email at the University of Dayton. I'm on my computer, I get an email. It says, "Greetings from the Rush Limbaugh Show." I go, must be spam, it's got to be some sort of trick, right? And no, it was from Rush's producer, the then H.R. Kit Carson. And he said, "Rush would like to interview you for the Limbaugh letter over this book." Man, that's awesome. So we set it up. I actually was in Washington, D.C. for a conference when Rush interviewed me in my hotel room by phone. I never got to meet Rush. I just really regret that. But he did an hour-long or more very comprehensive interview. Best interview I've ever had. Rush listened to the answers, and he formulated questions based on those answers. He didn't go in and try to cut me off and try to go somewhere and make the interview about where he wanted it to go. He really wanted to know what we wrote about, what was in the book, and what we had to say. And so we thought we had it made, because usually Rush would then go on when the Limbaugh letter came out and talk about the book on his show 2 or 3 times. And at the time, he had an audience of 20 million weekly, 4 or 5 million people at a time. And he was kind of like the Oprah of the day in terms of selling books. And we thought, this is it, man. We're just going to be huge. It's going to be fantastic. And lo and behold, when the Limbaugh letter came out, Rush got an invitation. This is during the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. He got an invitation to go meet the troops in Afghanistan for that full week. And when he came back, the Terry Schiavo case, which we will get into as we get into the very end of the book, was all that the media was talking about. And so we never ever got the bump from Rush's newsletter that I thought we were going to get. And so I thought, this is it. We're going to stay where we were, which wasn't bad. I'm not complaining. It was okay, and it was being adopted by homeschoolers. Even colleges were using us and Howard Zinn's book side by side, and I'll get into the Zinn thing in just a minute. But we didn't get the bump I really thought we were going to get until many years later. 6 years later, I was invited by a friend, Burton Folsom, whom I cite a lot in here. He's got great works. This is one of the things you're going to find with this show, folks. I'm going to give you books and historians and sources out the wazoo. So you might want to keep a pen and paper ready, because I'm going to keep dropping names and sources that you're going to want to look at. Burt Folsom has a fantastic little book, great for kids, called The Myth of the Robber Barons. And you're going to want to take a look at that book, because it's just a terrific book. Anyway, Burt had been on Glenn Beck's show, and I had never been able to crack Glenn Beck's show. And he got Glenn to invite me on. So I went on the show in 2010, and I gave Glenn a copy of the book. Here you go, Glenn. And he looks at it and goes, "Do I know this book? I know this book. No, do I know this book?" Well, it was clear he didn't know the book, because by then, the reaction from almost anybody except far-left nut jobs who had read the book was, "This is a great book." So I knew he hadn't read it. So I did the show, went back home. 4 days later, Monday or Tuesday, I get a call. "Hey, Larry, this is Glenn Beck. When you were on the show, I hadn't read your book." I said, "I know, Glenn. That's okay. No problem." He said, No, I always read the guest's book. I read this over the weekend." Just to remind you, "This is a great book." And he just went on not only to talk about the book 3, 4, 5 times a night on his show, when he had 3 million nightly viewers. He was a best watched TV show in the evening, short of a ABC kind of production out there. And he had postums in the book, and he kept it on his desk the whole time he did his show, kind of like this, along with another book, The 5,000 Year Leap, that you might want to take a look at by Skousen. And it just started to explode, and I got a call from the publisher, and they said, Larry, your book's #1 on Amazon, and it's going to be on the New York Times list next week, which to publishers is a huge, huge deal. In fact, it's written into our contracts. Anybody, if you make the New York Times list, you get an additional couple of points on your royalty check. If you make the top 10, you get a couple more points. If you make the #1, you get more points and so on. So it's a big deal to them. To me, the Times. So, I said, yeah, that's great. Next week, I get a call from the publisher. Larry, Patriots history is going to be in the top 10 of the New York Times. I go, woohoo, way to go. Next week, I get the call, and I can hear them partying in the background over the phone that they have on speaker. Woohoo, woo, woo! I know what they're doing there. Larry, your book's going to be #1 on the New York Times list. I said, wow, that's really good. That's great. No, you don't understand. It's going to be #1 on the New York Times list. I said, no, I get it. It's okay. It's wonderful. No, you don't get it. It's going to be in Target. It's going to be in Costco. It's going to be in Walmart. I said, wait a minute. Our book's going to be in Walmart? Thank you, Jesus. Because one of the goals, besides writing a textbook Mike Allen and I could use, one of our goals was to write a book that ordinary Americans would like to read and use as a reference, despite its size. And that indeed was what happened. And the book went crazy. I remember getting a note from the publisher. We were shipping 19,000 copies in a single day. That was just mind-boggling. And I will tell you that I wrote the biggest IRS income tax check of my life the next year. And fortunately, I had the common sense to put some money away for that. Now, before I go to our little ad, let me tell you about the title. So when Mike and I delivered the book, we were not thinking of Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. Our actual first title was called The Cup of Hope, which I think has kind of become a title of some other guy's American history textbook. The Cup of Hope, A Patriot's History of the United States, was a subtitle. And Bernadette Malone said, oh no, you can't do that. You've got to put that as the title. And then give us a subtitle that qualifies what else you're talking about. So right then and there, Cup of Hope became A Patriot's History of the United States, and the subtitle became From Columbus's Great Discovery to the War on Terror, because at that time we were in the War on Terror. So no, we did not write Patriot's History to challenge or counter Zinn's book. We really didn't even know about it. We hadn't paid attention to it. It wasn't on our radar. I know that drives leftists crazy. What? How can you not know people? I'd seen it referenced in the movie, right, with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. I'd seen it referenced, but I didn't know much about it. I certainly hadn't read it at that point. And to be honest, Mike and I did not read a lot of leftist histories when we wrote this. We read primary sources, and we went back to the beginning, and we did all the scholarship that is necessary to do. I just want to point out that our notes start somewhere around here. So that much of the book is in notes and sources. And to make sure we avoided criticism, I mean, we're going to get criticism. We knew that. We knew that leftists would not like it. Because even the New York Times reviewed the book. They didn't like it, they reviewed it. But we knew we were going to get criticism, but we wanted to minimize that as much as possible by citing leftist sources that we thought were accurate. If they said something accurate, we wanted to cite them. And so we did as much research as we could in the big journals: American History, Historical Review, Journal of American History, Journal of Southern History, Civil War History, Pacific Historical Review, on and on and on. American Economic Review, Journal of Economic History. I mean, the book is laden with sources. And I did a check before one of the editions came out, and something like 2/3 of our sources were post 1990. Now, I'm not talking about the original sources, which of course we have a lot of, but I'm talking about you can't say, oh, this is based on old scholarship. No, it is new scholarship, and we update it and update it. So we've updated it through 5 editions so far and 34 printings. Now, one last thing, and I'll give you a little promo here. What's the difference between a printing and an edition? Well, in a printing, you're allowed to change anything within a page so that they don't have to reformat the whole book, pay somebody to redo the index, all that sort of stuff. An edition, you can change anything. And so the Rush Limbaugh interview is in the second edition, the paperback edition that came out in 2006. Okay, it is not in most other editions. Obviously, the first one didn't have it, but even later editions, to get the book down in size so we could add more history and historical material, we had to cut out the Limbaugh interview. But you can still find that in the first paperback edition. So take a look at that. All right. Just a brief note from our sponsor, who is me. Please take a look at my website, thewildworldofhistory.com. Now, we have full curricula for high schoolers in U.S. and world history. Each curricula contains teacher's guide with answers, student guide, tests, answer keys, a built-in AP track. So if you're preparing your student to take the AP test, we give you practice in how to pass that test. Throughout the teacher's guide, student guide, there are references to go to the Declaration of Independence, page 775, whatever it is, in the Patriots History Reader. So we lead you right through the course. And most important of all, I teach the whole book in video with lots of imagery and lots of charts and data and all sorts of stuff. And you can get all of those images downloaded. The whole thing is downloaded, U.S. history. You get the teacher's guide, student guide, tests, all the images, and you get to stream all video lessons. And you want to know the best part? There's no license to expire. It's yours. Once you get it, if you've got 3 or 4 kids coming up, don't worry about it. You get one copy and it's yours. Now, I do ask, if you're in co-op situations where you have 15 or 20 kids, buy an extra copy for every 5 kids. But we're on the honor system, folks, and so do what you want. But there's no license to expire, so it's yours. World history. Since 1775. I wasn't going to go all the way back to the Egyptians, but we started in 1775 with the American and French revolutions, and we go up to the present. And I use a Patriots History of the Modern World, Volume 1 and Volume 2 for the second semester of that course. Now, by the way, both these courses are 2-semester courses, cover the full year, cover all your history requirements. And in the World History course, first semester is all primary source documents. For U.S. history, both primary source documents and Patriots History are the reading for that. At any rate, you can get these right now at a special convention price, or you can buy both of them together at a much reduced price at thewildworldofhistory.com. And if you want tons of other lessons, I have at least 4 other ongoing lesson series, from Reagan, the American president, to the 1620 default, why the 1619 project is wrong, to the horrible history of Howard Zinn, whom we just talked about. Those are all in video lessons. There must be 40 video lessons. All of my Wow Wednesday webcasts from the past 3 years are up, which I don't do anymore because I'm doing this. There's tons of other material. My latest book, All Thumbs, How Our Obsession with Cell Phones is Damaging Our Kids and Restructuring Our Lives. Check it all out for $6 a month for the VIP. It's amazing. Now, one last thing. We've just opened up our Wild World of Politics. So if you're not into homeschooling, you're not into education, you want the more wild, uncensored Larry, go to the Wild World of Politics and get the Insider. We're going to be having all sorts of interviews and discussions posted there, interviews with various people like Richard Barris, a pollster, Tracy Beans of UncoveredEC.com. And of course, if you get the Insider or the VIP, you will have access to my local show, which will follow this one. So check those two out. Get a curriculum if you need it, and get the VIP or the Insider if that's what you prefer. Let's get started with the book. Now, I was told I need to hold it up like this when I read, and I'll try, but sometimes I won't do it. So I'm only going to start with the preface to the 4th edition. I won't read all the prefaces, but I think it's important to read the preface. So here we go. Although it's only been 4 years since the appearance of the 10th anniversary edition, America has changed dramatically. Overlaying much, this is 2019, this edition came out in 2019. Overlaying much of the change was the rapid rise of several tech giants such as Google, Apple, and Facebook, which is now, of course, Meta. Did you know Meta means death in Hebrew? Think about that. Google, Apple, and Facebook, which affected virtually every aspect of American life, from consumption of products to finance management to entertainment. Most important, however, was how tech shaped how Americans got their news. The monopoly status of the tech industry in many cases threatened to control free speech and dominate public discourse through censorship of materials on the World Wide Web like nothing else in our history. This is a history book, not prophecy, folks, but how right was I in 2019, now that we see the China virus, as I call COVID, the China virus misinformation that they've been peddling for such a long time, now that we see how they completely lied about the January 6th Patriot Day, as I call it, the Patriot Day demonstrations, about everything else. The lab leak, they lied to us everywhere, and the media tech giants supported that. The monopoly status of the tech industry in many cases threatened to control free speech and dominate the public discourse through censorship of materials on the World Wide Web like nothing in our history. At the same time, colleges and universities, once bastions of free speech, have become censored bubbles where little true dissent can be allowed. By 2019, conservative speakers have been virtually banned or driven from most major campuses. This was an ominous sign for the survival of the republic. While there have been many other prominent changes in America since our last edition, with the end of Barack Obama's administration and the rise of Donald J. Trump, there has been a rapid shift in American policy and its regard around the world. Trump promised to, quote, make America great again, and proved in his first 2 years to be one of the hardest working chief executives in history. In less than a year, he transformed the economy from a moribund shackled giant into an international powerhouse and job-creating machine. His record pace at reconstituting the judiciary, along with much more constitutional and strict constructionist grounds, alone made his presidency a success. This came during a time of equally astounding and revolutionary social change. The fading of the baby boomer generation and the rise of millennials dramatically transformed America's attitudes, expectations, and daily life. It remains to be seen if millennials can rise to greatness or will be consigned to the cyclical predictions of William Strauss and Neil Howe. Now, Strauss and Howe, who are they? They wrote a book many years ago called Generations. And their theory was, and they went all the way back to the 1600s, and the first people who came over here and who were their parents. And they have a 4-part cyclical approach to history. I can't remember each of the 4 parts, but the bottom line was that they believed that each group was affected by the previous group and the previous group. And as a result, you start to see these same characteristics unfold in the people of each generation. And so, with the exception of the Civil War, I will point out they do make an exception of the Civil War, which kind of threw things off. their theory, you could say, appears to hold up pretty well. I wouldn't bet money on it, but I would say that it's a pretty good theory. So you want to check them out. Strauss and Howe, Generations. And then, I think it was Strauss, could be Howe, but I think it was Strauss, who then went on to write another book called The Fourth Turning, about this revolutionary cycle starting all over again, in which he predicted many of the problems we have today and why they came about. And some of you have heard this referred to in an old thing about rise to prosperity, sacrifice, prosperity, laziness, decline, that kind of thing. But it's worth taking a look at Strauss and Howe and how they deal with all of this. Strauss and Howe suggested that the generation after the boomers would be reactive and attack the established order. While elements of their theory may be right, the increasing lifespan of individuals has changed much of the layering of the generations. Only time will tell how millennials will affect the current political climate. Now, without getting too much into politics, it does not seem like that is what has happened. If anything, the millennials seem to be perfectly willing to go along with anything the government suggests they do. Wear a mask, take the vax, whatever, right? So we'll see how that pans out. It also seemed like only yesterday that we thought we might have to sell this book out of the back of a van. Little did we know that since 2004, Patriots History of the United States would become an Amazon and New York Times #1 bestseller with 500,000 copies in print. This edition marks our 30th printing. As I say now, we're up to 34 at least since release. A Patriots History has been used by thousands of homeschoolers and students in public, charter, and Christian history classes. More than 100 college professors assign their book to students. Isn't that refreshing? In this 4th edition, as before in previous editions, we have incorporated new scholarship and updated the narrative through the end of 2018 and the first half of the Trump administration. We have not made significant revisions to any of the major points except to incorporate a fuller discussion of the pillars of American exceptionalism, which we'll talk about in the introduction here. Naturally, to accommodate new material, we have had to cut some discussions of previous eras. The reader is encouraged to examine earlier editions of some of this now missing material, but the page count is a brutal taskmaster, as I said. All right, we're going to start with the introduction. There was something else, though, here that I wanted to mention to you, which was that we had a number of college professors using our book side by side with Zen. Mm-hmm. And they would ask the students to evaluate what each of us said about different things. And at first I was okay with that. But the more I thought about it, I'm not okay with that, because that gives credibility to a false source. If you look at, you're in our VIP section, you look at the videos on Howard Zinn, I explicitly go into how Howard Zinn lies. And he does lie in his book. He uses something called ellipses, 3 dots, that in history writing, or in any writing, are meant to show that something was left out. What are you allowed to leave out as a historian? You're allowed to leave out something that is incidental or does not in any way change the meaning, direction, or real content of a quotation or cited material. You're never allowed to join together statements made at different times, different places, different days about different subjects. What Zinn did repeatedly with Columbus and others all the way through was to use ellipses to eliminate all the material that would make Columbus look good or ameliorate some of the things it looks like he did or said and you get the picture. It's falsification of history. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay. Pillars of American exceptionalism. So let's start with the introduction of Patriots' history of the United States. And we'll just get a little bit through it today, and we're going to be out of time. But it's important to lay foundations, right? This is where the left is attacking America today on its foundations. And we are shooting at the issues, whether it's racism or homosexual marriage or whatever it is. We're shooting at the issues. They are shooting at the foundations. We need to rebuild the foundations. The purpose of this hour, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, is to help rebuild those foundations. The purpose of this book is to rebuild those foundations. All right, introduction. In America's past, a tale of racism, sexism, and I can't even read my own writing. Let's start again. Is America's past a tale of racism, sexism, and bigotry? Is it the story of conquest and rape of a continent? Is U.S. history the story of white slave owners who perverted the electoral process for their own interests? Did America start with Columbus killing all the Indians, leap to Jim Crow laws, and Rockefeller crushing the workers, then finally save itself with Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal? The answers, of course, are no, 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 and hell to the no. One might never know this, however, by looking at almost any mainstream U.S. history book. Having taught American history in one form or another for close to 60 years between us, that's between me and Mike, we are aware that, unfortunately, many students are berated with tales of the founders as self-interested politicians and slave owners, of the icons of American industry as robber baron oppressors, and of every American foreign policy initiative as imperialistic or insensitive. At least Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States honestly represents its Marxist biases in the titles. And again, we did not have that in the original introduction because we didn't care about Howard Zinn. What is most amazing and refreshing is, I don't think we had it in there, what is most amazing and refreshing is that the past usually speaks for itself. The evidence is there for telling the great story of the American past honestly, with flaws, absolutely. With shortcomings, most definitely. But we think that an honest evaluation of the history of the United States must begin and end with the recognition that, compared to any other nation, America's past is a bright and shining light. America was and is the city on a hill, the fountain of hope, the shining light, the beacon of liberty. We utterly reject my country right or wrong. What scholar wouldn't? But in the last 30 years, academics have taken an equally destructive approach. My country always wrong. We reject that too. Instead, we remain convinced that if the story of America's past is told fairly, the result cannot be anything but a deepened patriotism, a sense of awe at the obstacles overcome, the passion invested, the blood and tears spilled, and the nation that was built. An honest review of America's past would note, among other observations, that the same founders who owned slaves instituted numerous ways, political and intellectual, to ensure that slavery could not survive. That the concern over not just property rights, but all rights, so infused American life that laws often followed the practices of the common folk rather than dictated to them, that even when the United States used her military power for dubious reasons, the ultimate result was to liberate people and bring a higher standard of living than before. That time and again, America's leaders have willingly shared power with those who had none. whether they were citizens of territories, former slaves, or disenfranchised women. And we could go on. The reason so many academics miss the real history of America is that they assume that ideas don't matter and that there's no such thing as virtue. They could not be more wrong. When John D. Rockefeller said, quote, "The common man must have kerosene, and he must have it good, and he must have it cheap," Rockefeller was already a wealthy man with no more to gain. When Grover Cleveland vetoed an insignificant seed corn bill, he knew it would hurt him politically, and that he would only win condemnation from the press and the people. But the Constitution did not permit it, and he refused. In fact, America is an exceptional nation, not because its people are inherently superior, smarter, braver, or more moral, but because it is the only nation on earth that from its founding rested on 4 pillars, that we call them, that no other nation shared. The first 2 pillars focus on religion and small government politics, and the second 2 are economic pillars that support the first 2. Now, I'm out of time, but next session, Wednesday, we're going to pick up with the 4 pillars of American exceptionalism. This is all from the introduction, and it's very important that you understand these and that your kids understand these, because even Rush Limbaugh had trouble defining American exceptionalism. Niall Ferguson, the great historian, had trouble defining American exceptionalism. We don't. We've got it right here. Why is America exceptional? And it comes from these 4 pillars of American exceptionalism that to this day no other nation has, and no other nation has ever had in human history from its birth. Mm-hmm. More important, once you understand these 4 pillars, you will understand why the 1619 Project is total, hot, steaming garbage. Because it's based completely on Virginia and the Jamestown colony, when the real origins of American exceptionalism, not America, but American exceptionalism, as you will see, come from the Plymouth colony, which had all 4 of these from its origins. Jamestown did not. So I'm going to wrap up now and encourage you to join me at Locals in about 5 minutes, starting at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And there we're going to talk politics and say things that I can't say on this video. But I hope this video has been of value to you. If you don't want to buy a curriculum or buy a book, you can always buy Larry a coffee. You can find this at the bottom of my daily news. I'll put in a plug for my news too every day on www.uncoverdc.com. uncoverdc.com. I do today's news, and I review anywhere from 20 to 40 of the top news stories. I try to find things that not everybody else is talking about, and I just go through the headlines. You can get all the stories, but I just go through the headlines and give you the headlines of the day with some snarky, sarcastic, very Larry-esque remarks. If you don't know my nicknames, catch me on Twitter at Larry, capital L-A-R-R-Y, capital S-C-H-W-I-K, Larry Schweikart at Twitter. And you can see the full nicknames list. You're going to love those. They won't affect our reading here for Patriots history, but might help you out if you get into the local show and you go, who's he talking about here? So with that in mind, go take a look at the wild world of history, and I will see all of you guys back here on Wednesday at 12 o'clock Eastern.